What just happened at UFC 308 over there? Ilia Topuria stops Max Holloway. Khamzat Chimaev with Robert Whittaker. I got one of the best people in the world to help react to it. Our good friend Sanko is in the house.
What just happened?
What just happened?
What just happened? What did we just witness?
What did we just see? Okay. I want to get started with the main event. I want to talk about Ilia Topuria and Max Holloway. First of all, Laura, what was your reaction when you saw Ilia not just like tap Max and he kind of went down and then kind of like he put Max out. Max had blood running into his eyes. He didn't know where he was. Unbelievable scenes.
Unbelievable scenes is right. I think we all knew that that was on the table. Intellectually speaking, that's an idea that you had to entertain as a possibility going into this fight. We have seen what Ilia's power can do, but seeing it happen in real life and watching what feels like kind of, you know, everybody's favorite fighter go down like that, to be honest, that was kind of tough to watch. We've never seen Max in a position like that before, not even close. So goodness, the power that man possesses is something special. I think we knew it was elite, but we've never, ever seen Max Holloway in a position like that. And that's what Ilia Topuria did to him. It was incredible.
It was not, you know, Max, he did his best. He tried to keep Ilia distance. He threw a lot of kicks. He landed some decent shots.
Yep.
But the thing with Ilia Topuria that stood out to me was, like, he could just not break his will. That footwork and the way that he moves into the pocket, he basically uses boxing in MMA to set up his, sure, he throws some low kicks in order to go high, but just the way that he slips those punches and the way he gets into that pocket every single time. Are we looking at the best boxer in MMA right now?
I think we could be. I mean, he certainly has that sort of Tyson-esque peekaboo style of boxing that you don't see in MMA that often, because a lot of times when you're, you know, rotating your torso and using that as part of your head movement, a lot of times I think people teach that you're going to walk onto a knee or walk onto a head kick. When you're taught MMA, or excuse me, when you're taught boxing in the context of MMA, they take away some of that stuff, at least the coaching that I've experienced over the years. They take away some of the pureness of that boxing. And I just think Ilia Topuria has done a beautiful job of implementing about the purest form of boxing into MMA as you're going to find. But you're right, the low kick. I mean, Dean Thomas and I had this discussion in our preview, and he made a really good point that boxing is never pure in MMA, because you have at least the idea of kicks, you have the idea of takedowns. Even if you only ever end up punching to the body and the head, it's always going to be more than pure boxing. But I take your point. I do, though, think that those calf kicks were a big deal, and they were starting to not have a massive effect on the way that Max was moving, but you got to understand that idea starts growing and growing and growing in your mind as something that you have to pay attention to. And even the slightest bit of hampering of Max Holloway's movement, because his movement was what was saving him. And what is not just saving him, but it's also what sets up his offense as well for Max Holloway. So Ilia taking away even 10% of that in certain moments, that's going to be enough to get to Max. And that's what we saw.
Speaking of growing, what about the takedown? We all knew that Ilia Topuria was an incredible grappler, but it was so fun and interesting to actually see him be like, hey guys, here's a little wrinkle. I'm just going to give you guys a little taste here. The way that he was able to get Max down, super impressive. What did you think of that takedown and the way he was able to control Max like that, control his back like that?
I thought it was incredibly smart. And that's something that, you know, I think we needed to expect from him coming into this fight, because listen, even if you're not going to go out there and make grappling the forefront of your game plan, again, to my point earlier, introducing the thought of it, the threat of it, but the more real you make that threat, the more applicable it is, the more effective it is to set up your striking. So even if striking is the end game, to grapple him there, to show that not only he could get him down, but he could control him, he could take the back, he could threaten in bad spots. You start introducing all those things, and you've got Max Holloway paying attention to way more than just your right hand.
Max Holloway, by the way, hats off to him. Luke Thomas said it on the preview show. If he could have gotten this done, it was going to be one of the most miraculous recaptures of a UFC title. And he's always game for the biggest challenges. By the way, not a big fan of him getting that post-fight interview. I don't know. He just looked like he was out of it. I don't know. Obviously, it's different. The production truck tells you what to do. It's not up to you. But
Yeah.
would you like to see the UFC try to maybe make a hard stance if someone was put out like that? Because Max was slurring his
He
words, and
sounded
you got a guy who's the BMF champs. Like it's
yeah.
not. You feel bad for the guy in the moment, and it's not great for his thought process.
He sounded like he had a little waver in his voice too, like maybe he was, close to possibly getting emotional, which listen, that we saw DC have a moment like that. You've got so much of an adrenaline dump happening. You don't really know what's going on. Yeah, to answer your question, I do wish we would be maybe a little bit more judicious in terms of who we interview in a losing situation. And I think, a lot of times that's where you can allow the backstage reporter to step in. And
Mm.
I realize it doesn't end up making the broadcast, and that's what that's what the truck is in charge of. But even if you give those fighters 10, 15 minutes to get through medicals, kind of collect themselves, then sometimes they want to offer up their thoughts. Some of the best interviews I had as a reporter were, I remember like Ben Askren. I can't remember which fight it was, but the fighters that are willing to be reflective and they almost want to talk about what happened in there, you can get a really good post-fight interview. But yeah, the in cage right after it happened, no, I'm not a huge fan.
Yeah, I love your post-fight interviews. I actually think what they should do is when they do the press conferences, I reckon they should cut to one of your interviews. Like, okay, in between the guy, let's see what Laura cut up with this guy. Let's see what you know what I mean? Because I
Yeah.
feel like it's
Yeah.
great because sometimes what you'll get from the guys will be like a little tidbit or a little nugget that people in the press room won't see until afterwards. So
Yeah.
I reckon it would work really well. But I love those chats that you have.
Yeah.
All right. What's next for Max Holloway? It's got to be lightweight, right? It's got to be this BMF title, maybe. What would you like to see next for him?
I do. I want to see him at lightweight. I thought he looked so much better at lightweight. Even in leading up to the fight, I understand the camp went well. I know he can make 45. He's got Tyler Minton doing his nutrition, the best in the game. But just physically, when I saw him in the weeks leading up to this, I hadn't really necessarily been following Max, on a day-to-day basis. So it'd been a couple weeks since I'd looked at him. And then as we're starting to go in this, I was like, oh my gosh, his face looks different. And then when you watch the footage of him with Justin Gaethje, he just looks more athletic. He looks healthier. I mean, that's really the word, is he looks healthier. And I think that, I think lightweight should be his home from now on, personally. And I think he'll do well there. And he's going to have an amazing future in whatever he wants to do there. He's already proven his power translates. If you've already he's already ranked there, isn't he? I don't remember what he is, but
yeah, he's in there. He's in there. And the interesting thing is that he's got some good matchups. Like you got your Dan Hookers there.
yeah,
Them for a BMF title's fantastic.
I love that fight.
You just never know with Conor McGregor as well. Like they got that respect. Maybe that's a good fight that can come together. But with that BMF belt, there's a lot of fun fights there. Let's talk about Ilia Topuria and what's next for him. Alex Volkanovski told us in Sydney he was going to get into that ring. He was going to try and build up that next fight. But when he got in that ring and he spoke to Ilia, it kind of seemed like Ilia was like, yeah, like I'll fight him.
Yeah.
This guy's a legend, but I feel like he was just kind of saying it because Volk was in the ring. Like from his body language, I'm not getting like a big let's do this rematch vibe.
Yeah, I think it was sort of a little bit of I'm not gonna say forced moment, but like I read what you read, and I think that if Ilia had his druthers, he would have left it open ended, because every time you hear him talk, all he talks about is being a 3-division champion in the next couple of years. And in order to do that, you need to start eyeing those other divisions pretty quickly, because as we know, fights fall through, calendars change, all this type of stuff. That being said, I do think he has the ultimate respect for Alex Volkanovski, and I do believe he understands that Alex is deserving of another shot at regaining his title, and were the roles reversed, would do the same for him. So I think he meant what he said, but I don't think it was really this like hyped up, let's get in there and face off and like make faces at each other and start talking crap. They're like, oh,
it looked like he was there to congratulate him or something. It was like, yeah,
I love you. You're great. There's just
it wasn't the moment. Alex is too nice as well. Like they
both are. I thought Ilia.
It's not going to be like DC and Brock Lesnar when they Lesnar almost pushed him out of the octagon that
Yeah,
time.
no, I think that moment was so golden. That DC Lesnar moment was so golden. It's almost like we keep trying to like chase that dragon. Not everybody is gonna give you that type of juice in a situation like that. And I think Ilia Topuria is ultimately an incredibly classy and graceful champion. Will he pop off when provoked? Of course, we've seen it happen. But I think in general, he's not one to talk just for the sake of talking. I think he lets his fighting be enough of a promotion.
Before we get off Alex Volkanovski, and by the
Yeah.
way, like you'll need time to review the footage. So no one hold Laura to this, but on the spot right now, who do you think would win that rematch?
Oh my gosh.
A healthy Volk. We all know he was a bit
I
compromised in
know.
that
See,
first
that's the
one.
thing. That is the thing. A healthy Volk. And when you go back and you think about what a healthy Volk did to Max Holloway, he chewed him up, right?
Hmm.
Chewed him up in that last fight that they had. He proved a point. He showed not only can I beat you twice, but now I can really show that I am a superior striker. But I have to be honest with you. This age gremlin is really it's really a thing. And I certainly don't want to write the downfall of Alex Volkanovski. I was the one who said before one of his fights how much we need to appreciate him while we have him, right? While how much we need to appreciate his greatness while it is at its peak, because you don't know when the moment comes. And you don't even know like that moment will happen. You don't know that it's the moment until
Yeah.
a year later, maybe, until you look back in retrospect. I'm not writing that story for him, but man, looking at what Ilia did tonight and the wrestling and the submission threat, don't make me pick. Don't make me, especially not
Well,
an Australian show.
oh, come on, man. We understand it. We get it. They're all asleep now anyway. Okay, what about this? What would you do next for Volko? Because I know they're talking about doing like an interim title here at 312 in Sydney. But the thing is, how can you have an interim title when the champion is active? Like, you can't just do an interim title because you just want to do an interim title. Or can you? I mean, it is the
I
UFC. It's happened
realized
before. But he's
you're
not going to
dropping.
fight for no titles. Volko's not fighting for no titles. So what do you
Yeah.
do?
I mean, you're dropping news on me. I don't think I had heard that, which is interesting.
Yeah, he was at the press conference in Sydney last week, and he said that if Ilia couldn't fight, he's happy to fight Diego Lopes in Sydney in February, and he's hoping that the fight comes together. But he did tell me a number of times in interviews he ain't fighting unless the title's on the line. So I don't know, like a guy like him does deserve titles, but how do you bring an interim title in as well? You know, it's a
I
tricky
don't
one.
know that you can in that situation. There's no injury, there's no holdup. I think Ilia is unless he demands to go up to lightweight, which that that is a possibility. I don't know anyone who's dying to fight Islam, but Ilia seems hell bent on, making this run at history and being the only fighter to hold 3 titles. So I guess that's the only situation in which I could see them introducing an interim title. And then of course it'd be Volkanovski, versus Diego Lopes. I like
Yeah.
that fight regardless. If Volk is determined to only be fighting for gold, I think that's fine. I just think it could potentially hamper his schedule.
Yeah, I mean, if Volk wants to get the title shot and the title shot is not guaranteed, man, it hurts me to say this because I know how hard he worked to actually become champion. Like,
Yeah,
people don't even know how hard he worked to get into the UFC because they wouldn't even sign him.
I
But
know.
but man, taking out Diego Lopes, you're taking out another potential contender and putting
That's
yourself in a position to have to get that title shot.
Yeah, and I feel like that's kind of what Max went and did, right? I mean, he went and kind of went back down and took care of Arnold Allen, took care of, was it Korean Zombie was the other one in between? But
Hmm.
regardless, sometimes you have to go back and kind of remind people what you're all about. And if you are that guy, and I do believe Alex is that guy, then you do step up against the Diego Lopez's. And also at that time, you not only are you proving who you are and what your status is in the division, you're also doing the right thing in offering the contenders an opportunity to shine, right? It's
Hmm.
a win-win for both people.
Yeah, for
Also,
sure. Like if Diego Lopes goes out there, fights someone else, stops them, then you know, like his that now that grows. So you just got to take it out. And I
Yeah.
think that's probably one of the things, like someone like a Sean Strickland, like the mistake they made, like just sort of sitting back because you never know what's going to happen. We'll get to that in a second, but just quickly, Islam Ilia. What do you think that even looks like? Because we don't even know what Ilia Topuria looks like at lightweight, right? Like he's
Yeah.
doing a cut down of featherweight. What does his power even look like at lightweight?
I I think his power will translate. Is I worry about his physicality, I think, more than his power. Islam is an absolutely massive lightweight. You know, this is not Max Holloway fighting at lightweight. Islam cuts hard to 155 and probably would look really healthy at 170. So you're kind of talking about an in-betweener anyway. And I don't know that Ilia is necessarily the biggest featherweight on the entire roster. That being said, with that skill set, with that level of power, it's really difficult to poke holes in his capabilities. And I think the only question would be, does his physicality hold up in a fight like what you would expect to see from Islam Makhachev over, you know, a longer period of time? But man, I got to be honest. When I was analyzing this fight going into it, I thought it was going to look a lot different. So maybe
A lot of us did. I
take
mean,
my
no one
advice with
predicted
a
it
grain of
except
salt.
for me. I mean, I predicted it on the live chats. Everyone can go back and see it. But, you know, not everybody is me, Laura. It's
I
fine.
mean, it's true. Not everyone is you. That's a
I
fact.
mean, I had about 20 coffees and I've been up since 4 in the morning. So I don't even know who I am. How do I even know what a prediction looks like? Let me ask you this.
Are you
Ariel,
seeing colors yet? Or excuse me, tasting colors yet?
I'm like Darren
What's your
Tilger
thing?
in a weight cut. I need a wet towel and I need someone to help revive me. Hey,
Aw.
let me ask you this. Ariel Helwani went on Twitter just before and he said, whether people want to admit it or not, Ilia Topuria and Conor McGregor is probably the biggest fight in UFC
Great
history
fight.
right now. What do you think? Surely the UFC also understands this. They're looking to secure this TV deal.
That is a great fight. And that I think is a fight that Conor would want. I actually do, because I think Conor's going to feel like I'm way bigger than this guy. I hit just as hard. You know, he's not a relentless wrestler like some of these other guys would be going in there. Man, you may have just, you
You
may have
do it at, you
solved
probably have to do it
everybody.
at lightweight. You do it at lightweight or even, you know, whatever weight Conor wants to do it at. Like it doesn't really matter at this point. But
I guess it doesn't matter, but yeah, it's obvious. It's obviously, but can Conor make lightweight?
well,
We,
I don't
that's yet
know.
to be determined.
I
But the
saw him
reality
at
is, Conor,
BKFC. I saw him yelling at people randomly at BKFC. So I don't even know if he can make light heavyweight. Let me ask you this: who do you think is the more dominant, more explosive knockout artist in featherweight history? Conor McGregor or Ilia Topuria? Because those are the two names.
I'm trying to remember their stats, but if I'm just going off of like what I'm looking at in history, I might still give Conor a slight edge in history, but I mean, it just happened. It's really hard to deny what we
Well,
just
it's interesting, right? Because like Conor, he put out Eddie Alvarez the way that he,
yeah,
but that was a
that's what
lightweight.
I
But
kept
then how's
thinking.
Jose Aldo? That was a big one, and obviously his lead up to that, he had a lot of great wins. But now Ilya, you know, like he put out the GOAT and Alex Volkanovski. He's
Mhm.
just put out Max Holloway when Conor fought Max. Obviously, the fight didn't look the same, but he had those injuries. But it is interesting, and I think that is the narrative that goes in there. What do you think? What do you think a Conor McGregor versus Ilia Topuria fight would look like at this stage in Conor's career, though? And let's say they met at welterweight or whatever.
Well, I mean, obviously the weight class will determine a lot of what this fight looks like. I mean, I know Ilya is determined to do again this 3 division champion charge, but when I picture him, you know, 25 pounds heavier than what we just witnessed, does that suit him? You know, I don't know that it suits him. He looks damn good at 145. What does a fight between he and Conor look like? I do think it depends on the weight class. The reality though is we have no idea. We have no idea what Conor will fight like at this stage of
Mm.
his career. We just don't know. His body has changed a lot. He's overcome the injury. He's been heavily training and then maybe periods of not training so much. the footage that he shows sometimes on his social media is really confusing because sometimes it doesn't look anything like what he used to look like. You'll even just snippets of sparring and you're like, huh, that's different. And so I don't know. I don't fully, it's really difficult to predict because it's been so long since we've seen him. If we get the Conor that we had before, oh my gosh, that's a fight I'd pay $200 to watch. That would be an
Mm.
incredible fight.
I just think, yeah, I just don't, like you mentioned age and stuff. I just don't think there's a chance we could get that old Conor back. And I think even if we look back through the Dustin fights and even it's interesting because Conor's power when it came to like, him moving up in weight classes, I don't know if it really transferred as much as
Mhm.
Ilya's might. So it's going to be interesting. Quick question before we move off this fight. Is Ilia Topuria now the fighter of the year? Because we've got Alex Pereira, we've got Ilia Topuria. Alex Pereira saved a number of cards. So for
Yeah.
me, he's kind of still the fighter of the year. Like he's just kind of stepped up. He had the Khalil Roundtree Classic. He saved UFC 300. But I mean, Ilia Topuria just put out Max Holloway in that kind of fashion.
And
And
Volkanovski before it.
and Volkanovski before it.
And so here's what I will say. It just depends on how you define fighter of the year. Is it whoever captured the zeitgeist? Then that's Pereira. Absolutely. Is it who had the most historic, impressive run in a certain calendar time period? I do think you could give it to Topuria at that point because you are talking about knocking out two of the greatest featherweights of all time back to back. I mean, you just took out
Incredible.
the majority of the featherweight Mount Rushmore in a calendar year. So it depends on your definition. I tend to be more of the zeitgeist, like who's really sort of capturing what we're talking about and who we're excited to see and who's popping up frequently. But man, in terms of resume, Topuria.
I just can't
He
believe
fought
he
the better
did that.
guys.
I
That's
can't believe he did that to Max. I'm shocked. I
I know.
picked it and I'm shocked. All right, let's talk about it was kind of a weird day today. Like obviously really cool fights. But a bit of a passing of the torch in a couple of ways because we
Yeah.
saw Robert Whittaker in this fight with Khamzat Chimaev. I gotta say, going into this fight, we saw a different side of Khamzat. He spoke about his issues with mental health. He spoke about the fact that this kid has to get surgery after this. Spoke about all sorts of stuff, and a lot of people were questioning if we were going to get the same Khamzat. And it's interesting because in there, it's almost like him opening up like that and dealing with some of those things in his life. It almost made for a better Khamzat in the end. Like, what
Yeah.
did you make of this version of Khamzat that we saw? It was almost a more human, more honest, but then also more in touch with what's going on Khamzat. We've seen fighters really struggle with sort of dealing with all of those kind of personas going into their fights.
I think that authenticity is a really underrated aspect to an overall fighter's mentality. And when you start to believe or lean in a little bit too much to the caricature that you create of yourself. It's true parts of yourself, but you create this caricature. And I feel like that's kind of what he did for a while. Perching on the cage with Darren Till was an incredible moment that I will never forget ever.
Yeah.
But like, are you wasting mental energy in creating those moments that people will talk about instead of just staying and focusing in the zone? And I agree with you that I think that the more human version of him might be the better version of him because it's a more focused version. He doesn't feel like he has to walk around with this persona of like, I'm the boogeyman. You can be the boogeyman without telling everybody that you're the boogeyman. And that's kind of what he did. And this is another fight that I'll be honest with you, I got really, really wrong going into
Dude,
it.
a lot of us got it wrong. But before we even get into it, do you
Yeah.
think he made weight? Do you think he made weight?
I didn't see the live weigh-in, but I know
It was
I've
a bit
seen him
sus. It
weigh
was a
in
bit
Abu
sus, but
Dhabi
we've seen it
before.
before.
Say that again?
It was a little bit sus, but
Yeah.
it's
I
possible he made weight.
remember previous weigh-ins in Abu Dhabi being tremendously sus. So, it's a possibility, but I'll be honest, I didn't watch the weigh-in because I
Well,
wasn't on the show.
a rare break for one
Yeah.
of the hardest workers in the game. Let's talk about the fight.
Oh,
Khamzat Chimaev comes out there. We all knew he ran to the octagon. Robert Whittaker was dialed in. He looked great. We expected Rob to do better than what happened in that octagon. What was your reaction when you saw Khamzat be able to get that dominant position on Rob so quickly, but also show incredible maturity and calmness in
Yeah.
that position that we kind of haven't seen from him in the past, right?
I think, unfortunately for everyone in that division, he has been able to learn through fights that didn't go perfectly, almost the way that other guys have to learn through losses. So the Gilbert Burns fight taught him so much about what it's like to be in a 3-round fight, what it's like to be the nail and not the hammer all the time. And we saw him get better after that. Same thing with the Kamaru Usman fight. He didn't lose, so he doesn't have the L on his resume, but it was a fight that there was a lot to take and a lot to critique. And I think that he did that. And in combination with finally being healthy, with finally being a little bit more authentically open about being a human being, like we were talking about a moment ago, it's a scary proposition. The beginning of the fight played out the way I thought it would, in terms of I expected Rob to get taken down in round 1. Khamzat just has, for as tall as he has a level change and a penetration on his shot like literally no one else in this game does. The fact that a guy that tall can shoot from that far away and get to your legs and so low, like there's no down blocking, there's no digging underhooks. Like you're going to get taken down, honestly, and especially in round 1. It's a matter of what you do with it. But what did surprise me, of course, was the ultimate outcome, because I thought Rob looked good. He looked calm. He was doing a lot of the right things. And then he got submitted.
Rob has been in there with Yoel Romero. Rob's been in there with Derek Brunson. Rob's been in there, with Jacare, some of the most dangerous submission artists in the game. He's been in there with guys at the top of the grappling peak. We've never seen anything like that. Is Khamzat Chimaev the most dangerous grappler in MMA right now, or at least in the middleweight division?
In the middleweight division, he is. Yeah, he absolutely is. And it speaks to just the power that he has, again, on his shot. But then once he gets there, the way that he's able to step by step break guys down, attack multiple parts of them in a grappling sense, attacking the legs at the same time that he's attacking the upper body. But I want to actually talk about the face crank itself, because
yes, talk to me, Laura.
Yeah, so often you'll hear people say, "Oh, it's just pain and no one's going to tap to that." What I feel like the thing that people never talk about ever, when you do not have your teeth together and when you don't have your jaw engaged, which quite often you don't, even especially in a grappling scenario, when you're trying to like remain calm and just find your spots and dig underhooks, and or you're fighting someone on your back, you open your mouth a little bit to breathe easier, not like gaping, but you separate your teeth because you're relaxing and you're breathing. The problem is when your lower jaw and your upper jaw are not fully engaged and your teeth are not together, the second that someone applies a face crank, you're done. You can choke someone like put me back on the split screen.
Yeah.
Because I want to do this with you.
Let's do it. Where am I going?
Relax your bottom jaw, and then you're going to take 2 fingers and make a really ugly face.
Okay.
And try to breathe when your chin's all the way down there. You can't.
I can't do it.
You can't breathe.
Yeah.
People keep saying it's not, but worse than that is when the forearm comes across the side and your jaw's not engaged, your jaw will pop like that. And that's I think what happened to Rob, is he got his jaw dislocated.
I couldn't agree with you more. I was saying the same thing as the fight was going on. What people don't understand as well, people like Khamzat, it's not about getting a choke locked in or a submission locked in. It's about getting to a position where you can really hurt someone. Like the power that he would have in his grip and the squeeze that he would have is an absolute brutal one. And Rob's jaw got dislocated. What was your reaction when you saw the way that this thing finished and how Khamzat was able to get it done in the first round, though? Because we haven't, this is unbelievable. This is Robert Whittaker here.
Yeah, it's a bad man. It's a bad man. And he is exactly who he has been saying that he is. But I love that this week he wasn't screaming it, right? He didn't have to. And if this is the type of Khamzat that shows up healthy, focused, motivated by things that are going on, in his life, settled into a new camp with a new routine, with a healthier approach to training, it's a problem. This is a real, real problem for anybody in this division. And you start thinking about what he would look like against Dricus. And
Mm.
I don't know if Dricus, as good of a wrestler as he is and as physical as he is, I don't know that he has the pure grappling and wrestling technique to be able to put up with that. Now, the only thing we didn't get to see is what he looked like in a 4th or 5th round.
Yeah, exactly. Still questions to be answered there. It's interesting as well with Dricus because he's spoken about how people talk about how he stands switches, does this and that, but apparently a lot of that is just him just doing whatever he's doing in that octagon without too much thought. So I wouldn't see him like running away from a grappling situation
No.
with Khamzat. And I was telling Ben Davis in our live watch along that the way that Khamzat took Rob's back almost kind of reminded me a little bit of the way DDP attacked Israel's back in Perth, it's just like pure strength and
Yeah.
just like domination. So it'll be interesting to see. Before we give an early thought on that fight, what do you think is next for Rob? He spoke to me. He mentioned how he's got a couple of years left in the sport. I still think that this is a guy that has a lot to offer. And I think this is a guy that deserves to have a few showcase fights. Like the guy's always fighting the best of the best. We've got this big event here in Perth. I mean, in Sydney in February, UFC 312. It would just be great just to see him fight somebody that's not #1 ranked, someone that he could just go out there and do his thing against. But what do you think should be
Like he
next?
did last time. I mean, the last fight, forgive me, I'm blanking on the fighter's name, but because it was a last minute replacement. But I expected this fight against Khamzat to look different, in part because I have been so impressed with this latest version of Rob. And the fact that there is a latest version tells me that there's a lot left in the tank for Robert Whittaker. Leading into this fight, before this crazy outcome, or maybe not so crazy outcome, it was like this. I was calling him street Whittaker. Like he the last couple of fights, Costa and his most recent fight, just the level of chip on his shoulder, the level of like willing to get in there and show he's got the dog in him, and then remind everyone that he is levels above certain guys in this division. Yeah, I think he deserves to have a few more fights like that, because he certainly is nowhere near falling off in terms of ability or technique. I really think that the end to this fight was in part, I don't know. I was going to say he made a mistake, but Khamzat does that to everybody. So maybe I'm going to take that back.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I think looking back on it, I think he might do some stuff differently. It's interesting, like you mentioned, that, I don't think anyone's going to let Khamzat, even get close to putting them in that kind of crank again. You know what I mean? But how do you know that? Rob was supposed to be on the Commonwealth Wrestling team here in Australia. He's been up against some of the best grapplers in the world. I want to share my screen just for a second. It'll wait. So we got Robert Whittaker here. Who do you think could be a good matchup for him? Like, I like this Caio Borralho fight.
Yeah.
Obviously, Caio's got a lot to prove as well, and this would be a perfect fight. But yeah, Nasruddin would be great. How would you sort of fantasy book this? Because we've got Izzy here. Izzy's waiting for a fight. I thought Caio could be a good one for Izzy, but now I'm not so sure. If you had to book Izzy against someone and Rob against someone, who would you do? Who would you choose?
I would put Izzy versus Nasruddin and Caio versus Robert. I think
very good.
I think that the striking of Nasruddin Imavov, and he's got a tremendous ground game as well. So it's not like he's one dimensional, but I think that would be a really interesting, that would be an interesting fight. And I think that that's one where Izzy could really, really remind everybody potentially why he's one of the greatest middleweights of all time.
Now, who do you think should get this title shot? The UFC have held off on the Sean Strickland announcement, and I feel like they did it kind of on purpose. Like, they wanted to see how Khamzat was going to do. I've had managers and people behind the scenes tell me for the longest period of time that when Khamzat gets to this point, it's basically going to be like a runaway train, because he's going to be the champ for age, he's going to dominate, and he's a big name. The travel issues, we know. I don't know if
I
he
was
can
just gonna say
travel.
that's what it comes down
Yeah,
to.
but he's coming to Australia in December, apparently. So if he can make it in Australia, he can make it anywhere. If, let's say, he can travel. Yeah, we banned Eminem once. Did you know that? From coming down and
I think
touring.
I do remember that. I think I do
Yeah, in
remember that.
2000, we banned Eminem. We also had one of the longest COVID lockdowns in the world. Anyway,
You
the
guys are
government here is a bit, yeah, it's a bit zany. It's not great. But anyway, if he could travel, do you give him the next title shot against DDP? And also, don't forget, he hasn't taken much damage. Let's not forget that. So he's fresh as a daisy.
Oh, I'm such a Strickland fan that I don't want to say this, but I think you have to. I think based on just the level of excitement that he just generated, taking out former champion, one of the best in the division, been at the top of the division forever, first round submission. I mean, that when you talk about the mission being to go out there and make yourself undeniable, what else would you want from him than what he just did? So you have to. I think you have to. It sucks though for Sean because I believe that was stated pretty clearly. You know, you will be next. So I hate when that happens to fighters that they're all but promised, signed, sealed, and delivered, and then things change. But that is the nature of the game.
Yeah, I like Sean too and Eric, and it's just a bummer. But I just really think, Khamzat's here. He's ready to go. It's a massive fight. DDP and Khamzat have a lot of heat. And it's funny because, for Sean, he got to this title shot by fighting anyone. And here he could have fought Robert Whittaker, but he decided to hang back. And now this is what happens. It's like what we said with Volkanovski with fighting Lopes. What I want to know from you though, if you had to pick, is it DDP or Khamzat? Who would you side with?
I just think Khamzat might be too devastating. I think he might be too devastating. Someone who is that, and it's not like his striking is bad. We saw that against Kamaru. He's got enough of a kickboxing game, I think, to be able to hang with him there. And then I just don't know. I can't envision a fight where someone shuts down his wrestling enough to take it off the table. And when it's on the table, you've got the potential to have the fight over. We just saw that.
Can you imagine the money the UFC would make if they could get a DDP Khamzat fight and then you get Strickland to fight Khamzat after that? There's some money there. I mean, because of that, I think that's what's going to happen. Quickly, a man who I don't know whether or not they will get a title shot, but they did have a pretty impressive performance is Ankalaev.
Yeah.
He went out there. He wanted to show his striking, and he did that. He kept Rakic on the back foot, and Rakic, even though he threw some nice head kicks and a couple of good shots, couldn't really kind of get it going. Ankalaev was really able to control the distance, was really able to control the fight, and it was impressive. But wasn't impressive enough for him to get this title shot next against Alex Pereira. What do you think is going to happen next for him?
I mean, it'd be a lot easier to answer if he had gone out there and gotten some sort of a spectacular finish.
Exactly.
But I do think the fact that he kept it on the feet bodes well for demonstrating that, like, I'm not just going to go out there and be a quote unquote crotch sniffer, which is, let's be honest, that's what people don't want to see against Alex Pereira. Whether that's fair or not, it's just the truth. But you can't deny this guy at this point. 13 fight unbeaten streak. Like, at what point are you, sending him, chicken that's been laying on the counter too long for lunch? Like, what are you going to do?
Is that a saying? I've never heard that saying before.
No, I just made that up right now.
I love it. Let's,
you know what I mean? Like at what point do you just start putting banana peels in front of him as he's walking down the sidewalk and like giving him?
Is that a saying?
No.
Okay. I'll put it on a t-shirt too. So go on.
But like he's checked all the boxes many times now. And I don't know that it would necessarily be some trash fight that people are worried about being. I think he deserves his shot.
I think it's interesting because Alex Pereira has saved so many UFC cards.
Yeah.
He's so active that if you're the UFC, you're like, do we want to see this guy potentially lose against Ankalaev in kind of like not the most exciting fight?
Oh.
But at the same time, he lost against Izzy, and now look at what he's done. And I feel like if he loses against Ankalaev, let's say he moves on from that spot, you could still put him at a heavyweight. You could still put him in all sorts of fights. I still think he can probably save a bunch of cards.
Yeah.
So I'd like to see him happen. I'm a bit of a purist. I want to see guys get their shot. But at the same time, there's just so much exciting stuff you can do with Alex Pereira. And this guy never goes into a fight healthy. So I want to see him at least go healthy if he's fighting Ankalaev. Just quickly as well, before we wrap up, Laura, Shara Bullet, what do you think should be next for him? He's kind of becoming that next Khamzat in a lot of ways, like that person everyone's excited about. Where are you at with Shara now? How far do you think he can go, and what do you think could be the smart
Listen,
move for him?
I think he could go. I think he could go really far. I mean, that's clear that he can. That he's got an incredible striking game, and he's proven to this point that he's pretty difficult to deal with. I don't think he looked perfect out there tonight. I think that there are some things that potentially future opponents saw tonight that they might be able to, to take advantage of, because he does take a lot of risks. I mean, he opens himself up, but that's what makes him so fun to watch, and that's what so far has led to him winning these fights. I mean, who throws a double spinning back fist? I don't think any of us think anything you could even do. and I think the way he set it up too, the way he lifted his leg, it looked like he was going to do some sort of spinning kick or potential. I'm trying to remember what it looked like, but it looked like he was setting up some sort of kick, and then he ends up throwing a spinning back fist and another one right behind it. So the creativity abounds, and there's, I think, a lot of really fun matchups for him. He's not ranked though yet, is he?
I don't think so. I think this will put him up there. We'll see what Dana White's reaction is to that ranking as well. I love how Dana White doesn't know how rankings work, and also Dana White doesn't know how the pound for pound conversation works. But it's one of the things we love about him. No. Okay, as we wrap up, do you think this was the event of the year so far?
Oh man, see, this is tough, because you're talking about a calendar year in which we had UFC 300.
I think the Sphere was like one of the coolest events, not even of the year, but like in UFC history. But I think fight-wise, maybe this one, I don't know. It's like it blew everyone's mind. It delivered. Everyone was super excited.
It did deliver, but I personally still have to give it to UFC 300. UFC 300 was bananas.
It's bananas.
Bananas.
No slip. That's a yeah. Okay, as we wrap up, we're going into UFC 309 here. By the way, Alex Pereira, I imagine he'll be around there. He'll be around John Jones. He'll be trying to sort of position himself for a Jones-Alex fight, which, by the way, if you're John Jones and you're like, okay, Alex Pereira at heavyweight, that's a fun fight for me to get paid once again. But before we get to that, are you siding with everybody else? Do you think this is going to be a John Jones win here? Or do you think Stipe can sort of pull one out of his hat? Because let's not forget, this is a guy that stopped DC. This is a guy that's considered to be one of the greatest heavyweights. Unfortunately, this fight is happening about 20 years too late. Yeah,
well, this fight is absolutely virtually impossible to analyze, because we haven't seen either of them fight in many, many years. And the footage, I keep saying this, and I don't mean it as a diss on John Jones. I am of the belief that John Jones is the greatest of all time. And you've never heard me say otherwise. I think that man's the best thing that the sport has ever seen. However, the reality is we don't really know what he looks like at heavyweight. He beat Cyril Gane, but it was pretty quickly. And at least in terms of grappling, we saw some of that. But where we need to figure out where John is at is in terms of the striking. Is he still the same guy that will freeze people in front of him? Is he still the same guy that will string together the creative elbows and the oblique kicks? Is he that same guy? Because it has been many, many years since we have seen those things from John. And in the little bit of striking that we did see in the Gane fight, I don't know that I can tell you with 100% confidence that that's the case. And then Stipe, Miocic, how long has it been since we've seen Stipe fight? 3 years?
There's the lady from the Titanic meme, 83 years or whatever.
So I'm not saying that they're going to completely change their styles, but it is really difficult to get a temperature read on where these guys are going to be. That being said, do I favor John Jones? Yes, I favor John Jones. I do favor John Jones in this fight. I favor him based on what he has done, over the past however many, 15 years. But I'm not really able to base it on recent footage, of course, and nor do we know what we're getting on the other side. So this is going to be an education for all of us. But I do see John getting the win there. I wonder what's going to happen after that with John.
Yeah.
That's the question to me.
I think Alex Pereira could be the guy that keeps him in the game. But yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. Like Stipe has wrestling, Stipe has great combinations, and Stipe, if he does beat John Jones, we're going to be like, Stipe
Huh.
Aspinall. How does that even look like? You know what I mean? All of a sudden, people are going to start talking Stipe, but let's not forget this is a guy that can get it done, and another person that can get it done is Laura Sanko. Guys, make sure to follow her at Laura_Sanko on Instagram. What's coming up on the YouTube channel, Laura, and what do people need to look out for that's coming up?
Well, yeah, one-on-one, my YouTube channel, always some good content on there. I do a lot of jujitsu demonstrations, fight breakdowns for the pay-per-views. I will be calling fights at the Apex November 9th, and then I'll be at Madison Square Garden doing the weigh-in show and some backstage stuff, and then I'll be calling fights in Macau. So I have a very busy November coming up.
All right, no sleep, no stepping on
Yeah,
banana peels. Is that the same? I don't know.
yeah.
No,
No raw
any
chicken.
no raw chicken on the table for this person. Laura Sanko, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate you. What an honor and
Thanks,
pleasure.
guys.
Can't
Appreciate
wait to
it.
see you do your thing later on in the year, and make sure to follow her now. Thanks, Laura.
Thank you.